What is ADOS? And what does it have to do with the broken ish that y'all are supposed to be telling us about? And how has the experience of enslaved Black American descendants been so unique, so distinct, that they need a movement that is separate from Pan African unity in the diaspora? And finally, what can we learn from Minister Malcolm's work about how we should answer these questions and how we can all move forward towards life and liberation? Well, I'm so glad you asked because we are talking about it after the break. Hello, brokers. I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today we are breaking down what the term ADOS means and what it has to do with our fight for freedom.
Amber, this show, I feel like the people on YouTube are going to get very messy because I'm going to be vulnerable in ways that I'm not normally vulnerable. I'm going to share some things that, I might be a little afraid to share. But because I am so interested in the liberation of Black people, I'm going to do those things for y'all. But before we get to that, though, what have you been up to? What have you been doing?
Well, y'all know I am an old Black woman masquerading as a 40-year-old. And so I've been having like this feeling in my bones. Like, hell, I don't know if I'm going to die or if I'm going to get a job because y'all know I still don't have no job yet. But I need to like clean up. So I've been like spring cleaning, but except it's summer. So I've just been like redoing my whole house, cleaning out the office, the closets, cleaning everything. And I've been doing that a lot. But I haven't been for like the last few days because y'all, my grandbaby is here.
Yes, that's correct. Grandbaby at 40 is crazy.
y'all know I'm married to Father Abraham, so he's a little older than me.
First of all, your husband is my age. Let's just...
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a funny story because it does, you're going to catch a stray, and I need that in my life. So me and Noah, we were getting...
Noah, your grandson.
Noah's my grandson, yes. And he's 5. And so I was dressing him to take him to camp yesterday. And so he saw the picture on my phone. That's my wallpaper. And it's my husband and me. And he said, wow, Grandma, you look so beautiful in this picture. And then he started asking me pictures about Pop Pop. And he said, how old is Pop Pop? And I said, he's 48. And his eyes got big. And he said, wow, that's crazy. Pop Pop is so old.
It's not funny. It's not funny. And I've never met Noah, but I'm about to say some bad things about that little boy. Never. Noah, let me see you and I'm going to pinch you. When I see you, I'm going to pinch you.
You better not pinch my baby. But yes, he could not believe that. He said, that is so old. I said, it is, baby. It is.
Both of y'all are ridiculous. But at least he's 5 and ridiculous.
Yes, but we've been having a good time. I just been, it is kind of nice. The grandparents have a point. You just buy stuff and say yes. We have parties. He jumps in the bed. And my kids be looking at me like, girl. And I'm like, what?
Right. You're not the grandbaby.
That's correct. So I'm having a good time. Just trying to get my life in order. How you been doing?
I'm good. I'm actually by myself in my home alone. So my children are both on these 2-week journeys. So both of them are out of town and my husband is working out of town. So I don't even know what to do. Like I'm looking around when I see stuff that's wrong. I'm like, who did that? And I'm like, oh, I must have done it. It's just very strange. I'm by myself like this so irregularly that I don't even kind of know how to act.
When you don't have nobody to terrorize, Pebbles?
Well, I can still terrorize people over the phone. Don't misunderstand. I'm a be a terror no matter. But yes, now it's just long distance.
I'm glad you admitted it. So Are you realizing that you don't like being alone, or you like being alone? Because I want a tiny house in the back. I don't really want to live with my family personally.
No, I love being by myself. I love it. No. Don't get me wrong at all. Because the question that I hate every day is, what are we going to eat? And so that question, I don't have to deal with that question for the people, right? In my refrigerator right now, I have like tequila. I don't have anything else. I have tequila chilling, and I have nothing else, and it's fine. Everything is great here. Yeah. So,
Well, cheers. I love that for
yeah,
you.
exactly. I think the man coming back tomorrow, though. So,
Oh,
um,
okay. Okay.
yeah, but that's good because then that'll just be, but yeah. Um, so we'll still have a couple days without the children, but there you go.
Oh, well,
Mhm.
congratulations. I'm going to Houston tomorrow to see Beyonce, so I too will have a few child-free days. I'm
I
going
can't wait till this Beyonce concert is over. I'm so sick of people sending me pictures of these damn outfits and hearing about what she doing in this city and that city and all the social media. I cannot wait for this to be over. I'm looking forward to it. Mhm.
she probably got a ticket to one of the shows, y'all.
I don't have a ticket to one of the shows, but okay, let's get to it. So,
Okay.
Amber, like I said, this show has been such a long time coming because in the group chats that I'm in with some of the people that we're going to bring up, but just like the group chats in general, there are always these conversations about ADOS and FBA. And I'll just say from my perspective about the conversation today, I don't know. I know a little bit about FBA, but I'm like putting them into a different classification, right? And maybe later I'll explain why. But I'm from my perspective, this conversation is really around this phenomenon of ADOS, right? American Descendants of Slavery.
And what is
And
FBA too? Just so let's tell everybody.
foundational Black American. Thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out. Yeah.
Okay.
And so foundational Black Americans, I'll just give a little bit of background, was sort of, I guess, founded, if you can say that, by Tariq Nasheed, who is probably the kindest thing I can say is a shady character, but there are other unkind words that I can use, but my mama be talking about because sometimes she be listening to the show. So I'm gonna try to, but anyway, so a bit of a shady character. And for me, the FBA, in terms of like Tariq Nasheed's founding of it and the messages that he gives to his followers, it is it can be very nasty and very mean spirited and all of those sorts of things. And really, I think that he is just a grifter and he's just grifting off of the ADOS politics, right? So whatever you think about that, I think that's what the case is. So I think by talking about ADOS, you're actually talking about like sort of the origin of all of this, because I don't think there's an FBA if there is no ADOS. So
That's fair.
that's
Okay.
my take on that. But so this intro is going to be a little bit longer than normal, but I'm just going to give it by just so that we can have that foundation. So roundabout in 2017, when Delina, who is my former co-host and the person who I sort of created Brokish with, not sort of, the person who I created Brokish with, um, we started thinking about having a podcast and thinking about what the podcast was going to be about. And so initially for the brokers, you all know that Brokish started out being just about like the financial position of Black Americans. That was sort of what we wanted to talk about. And in that, I started going to the internet in ways that I had never before, right? So I started watching things on YouTube. I started reading more articles about just Black people and Black economics, how Black people compared against white people in terms of our finances, all of these sorts of things. And what that led me to Yvette Carnell. And so for those who don't know, Yvette Carnell is one of the founders of ADOS. And she and Antonio Moore are the founders of the ADOS movement. And whether it's the actual advocacy foundation they have now or the political movement that you've seen. And so when I tell you, and this is the part that I know that people are going to make fun of me about, but it is what it is. Okay. So when I tell you that I have watched so many hours of content, right? ADOS content, I spent tons of my time. And keep in mind, these shows are like 2 hours long. This is not for the faint, right? You have to be very dedicated to this. So
Mm-hmm.
2 hours long, 2 times a week, I would watch Yvette Carnell. And I was fascinated because she was bringing on people that I later came to have a lot of respect for, like Sandy Darity, the economist. She had Jared Ball on her show, all of these other people that I like, Black academics that I would see. And earlier on, before I think ADOS became what it is today, people were, would go into her show, have conversations. And again, I was trying to learn about Black people and our money. And so I went there with that as the goal. And honestly, I learned so much about like Black people and sort of making sure that I wasn't approaching Black people from a deficit, right? Like a lot of the respectability is that y'all are like this because, right, you buying too many Jordans, you buying too much weave and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, the exposure to those early years of ADOS, it was like, no, here are the reasons why Black people don't have money. And it's not because of Jordans and it's not because of weave and it's because of other things. And so I appreciated all of that. But at the same time, I also would see the other parts of ADOS. So we'll talk about all of that. But I just really honestly have to give a lot of credit in terms of my coming to some sort of consciousness about the positionality of Black Americans and my desire for the liberation of all Black people from ADOS, right or wrong. Like those 4 hours a week that I would listen to all that stuff for years, right? Like this went on probably through 2020, right? So there were at least 3 or 4 years. I love how you looking at me and you want to be like, oh, baby.
No, this is no judgment. That's no judgment.
You're looking at me like, you're like, oh, Erika, I'm so sorry.
That's no judgment. There are worse ways to come into consciousness. Let me just tell you, there are worse ways. There's no judgment. No judgment.
And so because of that, I have like what I know is an unhealthy desire to help other people be like, but no, I understand that those folks have come to some different conclusions that I've come to, but I also think that there is some benefit in what they have to offer. So we'll talk about that. And to talk about that, we are going to bring on, for instance, I'm sick of reading his bio, but I do it just because I like to make him upset. And so I'll just piss him off real fast.
You can just cut it completely. No need.
Okay, y'all, look, we got Dr. Kehinde Andrews with us today. He lives in Birmingham, UK. He's a professor, a public intellectual and scholar. He is the author of many books, but his latest is Nobody Can Give You Freedom. And for those of you who don't know, we're using Malcolm X and sort of the book and the framing as our backdrop for this season and grappling with a lot of different issues. So today's issue is sort of Black politics and what we think Malcolm might have said or would have to say about a formation like American descendants of slavery. We ain't even started and you laughing already. Like
I was just imagining. That's what.
But because Kehinde, I know, is going to be biased in the wrong way, we also have a new friend joining us. So today we have Salifu Mack, and he is a high school U.S. history teacher and a former journalist at the U.S. State Department targeted media company Africa Stream. And you all can see lots of news on the internet about how Africa Stream was sort of banned. But anyway, he is also an incoming PhD student in the Department of Anthropology at the University of California in Santa Cruz. Bless his heart. We love that for you though, Salifu. And his organizational commitments are with the Black Alliance for Peace, BAP, the Low Country Action Committee in the Low Country of South Carolina, and the Thomas Sankara Center for African Liberation and Unity in Burkina Faso. Salifu, welcome to Brokish.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to say y'all two are so funny. Like I was over here cracking up in the introduction. And also a testament to the idea that like Black don't crack. Because y'all talking about having grandkids and kids. That's so beautiful. Y'all are so beautiful. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Salifu. And I am not old enough to have grandkids. No, I'm just playing. But I do want to give a shout out to, so the reason how we met Salifu is because I was at the National Black Radical Organizing Conference. Make sure I get all the letters in, all the words in. And I was so happy to meet, I guess he don't mind if I would say, so I met Musa there. And I was talking to Musa. And so we were having a really great conversation. And I mentioned that I wanted to have a conversation about ADOS. And Musa was like, I think I know somebody who would be willing to have that conversation. So thank you to Musa for the introduction. And thank you, Salifu, for coming to join us and have the talk.
Absolutely.
So now that I have been so transparent And I know Kehinde is over there. And when I know next time we're in the group chat, he's going to be like, this is terrible. You can never tell anybody that you came to consciousness from ADOS. That's the truth. That's what happened.
It explains a lot. I understand you much better now.
That is so rude, and I hate you.
But I don't mean that in a bad way. But who's my favorite person? Malcolm X. Malcolm came to consciousness in the Nation of Islam, which is worse than ADOS. So it doesn't matter how you get there; it's how you get there, right?
Come on, Olita Adams 316. Come on.
Get there if you can.
Yes.
He don't know that song. Anyway.
Of course I know that song.
So, like I said, what we're trying to do here today is we are looking at ADOS from the perspective of Malcolm X, but also just the perspective, our own perspectives, right? In terms of what we feel about the, if I can call it an ideology, I will, maybe a philosophy. And so to give a little bit more background. So like I said, going back to 2016, 2017, I think is when the ADOS hashtags, you started to be able to see them on social media, right? And what often happened is that the beliefs of ADOS, and you can see this on their website, the ADOS Advocacy Foundation, they have some core beliefs. And the core beliefs are in the need for reparations for Black Americans. And so to be clear, when they say Black Americans, they don't mean Black people in the Americas. They mean Black people in the United States of America, right? So Black people who have...
With a specific lineage.
With a specific, and thank you for using the word, because that's exactly the word, with a specific lineage that is here in the United States. And the goal is that you have 4 Black American grandparents, right? But they do make room for people who are biracial. So if you were to have a white parent and a Black parent, that the Black parent would have, Black parents, right? So there are some, I guess, some concessions they make for people who don't have the full ancestry or lineage. But so they want reparations for people whose grandparents are from here. And so one of the things I do want to point out is that they claim that the reason why that ancestry is so important, and Amber, I'll be happy to get your opinion on this as an attorney, is because they think that they are trying to make a legal case for reparations, right? And so in their estimation, to make a legal case for reparations, you need to have a class. So Amber, you know how when you are suing somebody for something, a class action lawsuit, right? You're trying to figure who's in and who's out. And so when you build the class, with the class, you have to have certain requirements that somebody would meet to be eligible for the class. Yes. So they, according to them, right, they're not being xenophobic by excluding people who don't have that lineage. What they're trying to do is say, ultimately, we want to be able to sue. And so in order to be able to sue, we need to have people meet certain requirements. That is what the basis is. And Antonio Moore is an attorney, so that probably plays into why that's a thing.
Yeah, and the last case was dismissed when they tried to bring the case against JP Morgan. And it wasn't a class issue because the class has to be certified. So before you even get there, you have to have standing, which means you have to have a legal right to bring a claim. And so part of the issue that pursuing reparations in a judicial framework has faced is the people who are bringing the claims were not themselves enslaved. So then the question becomes, how do we give you a reparation for a harm you did not suffer? And that's really essentially been the argument that has blocked judicial enforcement of a lawsuit. And so I think that part of the genealogical stuff around this is that if you are the descendant of 4 Black grandparents, then there is a claim that there is residual harm that gives you standing to seek reparations, almost like somebody bringing a claim on behalf of an estate. Like how if somebody dies and they're suing for injuries, the claim doesn't die because they die. It survived and the estate can bring it. And so I think that is why, because you can't even get to a class if you can't show that you have standing,
Yes. And so, but I think for me, just in terms of giving some details of how we get to where we are and the rationale, some of the rationale, because a lot of people are like, xenophobia. Yeah, it could be xenophobic, but I think in their minds, they are trying to at least be like, we're doing this because we're trying to make a legal case.
But are you being completely
messenger.
honest though? But I do think that is true. But are you being completely honest about the fact that there's no xenophobia entangled?
No, and I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Not at all. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay. I just want to be clear. Okay.
I'm just trying to give some background so then Kehinde can go, because I know he's ready to go. So I'm just going. So anyway, so reparations is a big deal, right? So I think we all agree as people who've seen ADOS, reparations is a big deal. And another thing is that in the hashtags online, in this online world, you see a lot of American flags, right? And so a part of that is that they have this belief of we're Americans. And so one of the fights that Kehinde and I have a lot is like, he's not British. And I'm like, you might not claim that you're British, but when you go to Canada in a few weeks, you're going to take your British passport and the people going to be like you British. And so, you know, whatever you call yourself, you are, what'd you say?
I'm gonna have a cup of tea while I'm over there with some milk.
You might. You're effectively British, right? And so, but the difference is that ADOS folks like wear the flag, right? So it's not just that I'm American, but I'm proudly American, right? So I'm coming to this not from the perspective of somebody who is like, yeah, I live in America, or I live in the US. And yes, my family is from the US, but I don't necessarily subscribe to the values of this nation. I'm not one that wants to hold this nation up as some sort of an exemplar. Like I was born here and yeah, I have the passport, but that don't make me the thing. So that's another thing that's very different is they want to wear the flag. They are proudly American. Like, look at my flag. So that's another part of it. And then they also have, I think what they say on their website is different than what they say in the videos. And as somebody who's watched hundreds of hours of the content, I can tell you. So to the point of xenophobia, they use words like tether to talk about people who are not Black Americans, who might be Nigerian Americans, who might be Jamaican Americans, who come to the United States. They use terms like anchor babies, right, to talk about people who are having children and come here. So there is very definitely a xenophobic element that I do not want to dismiss at all. But those things, right, you don't see in the formal, this is who we are. And even on their website now, they talk about the fact that they invite allies to join them in on this fight for reparations, right? And those allies could be white people, but they could also be Jamaican Americans or Nigerian Americans or Ghanaian Americans or whatever the case may be. So I'm sorry, y'all, that was a lot of background, but I'm just trying to put all that out there. So one of the things to first talk about is in my research, and Salifu, you don't know this, I'll share a bit of background. I'm doing research on financial literacy. And one of the things I'm finding is that Black Americans and have this like desire for a belonging, right? So there's like this desire for citizenship because our parents and our grandparents never felt a full sense of citizenship in this nation. And so it feels like, at least in my research, that's coming up, right? And so what you see with people who are like from Jamaica, so like Kehinde's family is Jamaican, he could, if he wanted to, wave a Jamaican flag and everybody'd be like, go Jamaica, right?
And or people are pointless. Absolutely pointless. But yeah, I could do it.
You could do that, but nobody would bat an eye. But as soon as Amber, when it's the 4th of July, and she probably gonna do this, you know, she bring out her American flag. And then people got a problem with Amber because Amber pulling out her American flag and she going down to the lake to go look at the fireworks. So Salifu, what do you think about this idea that we are all in this colonial structure, but why are some Black people in different parts of the colonial structure? Why do they get the benefit? Not the benefit, but they get the ability to be able to wear those flags proudly, but Black Americans can't do the same thing?
I love this question. Before I start, I want to say there is a Cuban flag behind me, but I am African American. All my entire family is born in the United States. I am famously a tether online to FBA and ADOS because they have a lot of featureism baked into their ideology as well that we
Yes.
might be able to discuss. So no matter what I say to them, I was not, my family is not from here, but I literally, I'm a Gullah Geechee man. Like I am, my family was born in the United States. I just want to clear that up. I think when we talk about like, oh, we're all in this colonial system together, I do think that it's like important to acknowledge that while colonization is this process that was like kind of forced on the entire world by Europeans, like this idea like that Kehinde, for example, a country like Jamaica is similarly colonial to the United States is one that really has to be kind of broken down and explained a little bit. Like the United States is not a normal country, like in the traditional sense.
For sure.
That's why kind of why people use the language of like empire. And I think this is just kind of me as like a history nerd. I think the United States kind of gave up that status somewhere around like 1890, the 1890s during the Spanish-American War, when the United States decided that it was beneficial for them to sort of join in on the game of imperialism and to start collecting countries to add sort of to their pocket. So Spanish-American War is when the U.S. picks up Hawaii, the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and obviously Cuba. And so I think that's like the beginning, right? And from there, the United States is going to continue to expand like tenfold. I mean, I don't even know really where to start. Like the U.S. remains the only country today to ever use nuclear bombs against another country. After World War II, the United States is going to be able to rise to prominence as one of two dominant world powers alongside the Soviet Union, because Europe is going to be in absolute shambles after World War II, and the U.S. didn't happen in the U.S., so we can kind of take advantage of that. Then we kind of get into the Cold War. The U.S. is just going to wage all these proxy wars in other people's countries to defeat communism. So you're going to see the U.S. go into a place like Korea and draw a line literally in the sand, and that country is still struggling to reunify today, and that happened in like 1948. Once the Soviet Union is dismantled, the U.S. is going to reign like solely as the sole unipolar power in the world. It's going to be in control of the world's most lethal military formation, NATO, even still to this day. And I mean, even if we stop talking about like the military and just talk about like financial power, financial structures, the U.S. dominates the world's financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, which are intentionally used to hollow out countries like Jamaica. Jamaica as a country doesn't have, that kind of power. So to be clear, like the United States is like this imperialist power that has the ability to force poverty. They can change your president. They can collapse your country without ever putting a single boot on the ground. And so I think it's something like 2/3 of the world today is under some form of sanctions, either designated by the United States or supported by the United States. So the United States can like literally just punish your country because they said you did something, and like nobody really has had the power historically to do anything about that. We're talking about a place that has 800 military bases across the world, has divided the world neatly up into like 11 zones of responsibility. And so there's no country in the world that comes close to
For sure.
that.
For sure.
Certainly not Jamaica.
Yes,
sorry.
but no. I was just going to say, you're absolutely right in terms of Americans' power and dominance, right? Like, I don't think anybody would disagree with you, and certainly I don't at all. But just to the point of take Jamaica or take Ghana or take Nigeria, why do we, as people who ultimately are, in my opinion, at least, as people who are ultimately just African people, right? And even just the idea of borders and all of these things, why do we have them? They're not real. Do we need them? If we're thinking about that, then why do we want to have pride in a place like Jamaica in that sense? Like, why is it necessary for us to wrap ourselves in that flag either? Kehinde, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's not. Like, I say this all the time. Like, I don't claim Britishness, and I get in trouble with Jamaicans all the time because Jamaica is a prison colony. Let's be realistic. Like, my family's in Jamaica because we were taken as slaves. That's not home. My dad calls it home. That's not home, right? That's a prison colony, and independence is a complete make-believe. I never celebrate Jamaican independence because the country's not independent. And that whole national project, that whole many one people, that whole flag, that's offensive in so many ways, right? As a state. So so I would actually say the thing that people like, if they want to yearning for why can't we do this, that's just the wrong thing to be yearning for, because that national project is one of the things that keeps us locked away from each other. Ghana, Nigeria is not a country. It's got 200 million languages.
It's an oil company with a wig on.
Complete
Did you say
creation
an
of-
oil
of-
company with a wig on?
Yes.
Exactly. That's not something you should be proud of. We should actually be saying, look, we are one people. Like, you got the Pan-African colors. I mean, look, one thing I will say, and I think it is different. Salifu makes a good point. Saying you're American is like me saying I'm British and being proud to be British. And I know about 3 black people who would pick up the flag and wave it in that sense. You know, because it's a colony, because it's a majority. You know, Jamaica has a particular culture that we should be proud of, etc.
Yes.
But that's also the case in the South. If you said you were from Louisiana, nobody would say that's a problem. They say that's great, Louisiana black culture, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can't do these things. It's. I think it's just I see what you're saying, but it's a misguided dream that doesn't lead us anywhere. To say, look, let's wave ourselves in the flag. They're completely different things.
Yeah.
I also think that there is a way that you can make an entitlement to what the ideal is without making a claim on Americanness, right? Like, because we're here. And I think that's the part of it that's conflated. Like, you don't have to pick up the mantle of Americanness to say that there are certain promises that were made that were fraudulent, that we are entitled to as people here, that have been intentionally withheld from us. And we want that. I think the problem is that, and to me, this is sort of kind of where my issue with ADOS is, that it is in a tiny way, respectability masquerading as radicalness, because you want a piece of the pie. Like, at the end of the day, that's what you're asking for. You're asking for a piece of the pie. And you might not be asking for it in the same way that Jack and Jill or AKA is asking for it. But at the end of the day, what you want is a piece of the damn pie. That's what you're asking for. Period.
Yeah.
Well, so again, and I just want you to know my position here is to bring up, because of the hours of content that I have consumed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be the proxy, unfortunately, right? So they would say, to the point of, we don't have to put on the Americanness. What I think they would say is this idea of our ancestors toiled here. So for us to not take on the Americanness is for us to forego the things that our ancestors toiled for. Our ancestors wanted to be citizens, right? They didn't want to be 3/5 of anything. I am representing.
I think they wanted to be alive. I think that's why our ancestors wanted. They just wanted to be alive.
And they wanted to be free. And of course, if you cannot go home, the next best thing is, well, shit, I'm here. So yes, I would like to be free here. But I don't think that ever started out as the goal. I think what they wanted was to go home. They want to go home. Our ancestors wanted to go home. That is what they wanted.
And
Yeah.
I struggle with that. I struggle with that argument so much, because I everything I'm saying, I really hope like it can be received like with love. I'm really not trying to be snarky or anything like that, because similarly, Erika, prior to becoming a Pan-Africanist and learning a lot of the things that I learned, I kind of fell into a lot of those arguments as well, right? And I think that's something that I famously used to say myself, is like, oh, our ancestors built this place, so like, you know, got to do it for them. But in the past few years, I feel like I've really come to learn that, like, when we say that, we're lying, and like it's kind of disrespectful. And I think it has like 2 different parts of it. Like Amber said, I feel like we got to be very clear, like, our ancestors did not like sign on to a shift, like they applied for the job and like, oh, I'm gonna build this thing. Like they were forced under the threat of like constant violence, and to lay the foundation for this empire that I was just describing. And like I agree with Kehinde in saying that, like, the independence flags of a lot of African nations, they're really useless. But like the flag of the United States is kind of violent in some ways, like when you understand what that represents to the vast majority of people in the world. But when I say, even unknowingly, but my ancestors built this, no, that's not what they, no, I'm not laying that at their feet. I'm not going to blame my great whatever, you know, it is, for building the most violent empire to ever exist. That's not what that was about. It makes me feel really icky to kind of like place that on my ancestors. And then again, that claim to like the spoils of empire, man. I just
we're the biggest capitalists, the biggest and best capitalists. Like I think
we are the biggest and best capitalists.
Not in terms of like our productivity, but I mean our desire. Black Americans have a super desire to be capitalists.
I think for sure.
But I think we're not capitalists because we don't have ownership of nothing. But I'm saying this in the sense of, again, part of that citizenship is a desire to have part of ownership. And so that's why I think that desire for us to build businesses and try to be enterprising is, these things are all connected. But I do want to, I'm sorry.
I was just, but what are you owning though? The thing with because they say that in Britain too, like, you know, we built Britain, it's kind of true. But think about if you build a slave plantation, would you then just move into the big house and run the plantation? No, like if we understand that what we've built and we did contribute to, and it wasn't our fault, we were forced to do it, is horrendous. Why do you want to be part of it?
Like, because that's the dirty truth that people are not telling, is that there is a whole swath of people who do not want revolution. They want regime change. And that is why the adjective Black in front of capitalists satisfies certain people, because they are, they're not trying to undo the system. They just want, again, to be empowered in the system. And I do think that part of why, I mean, we were kind of talking about this in the group chat the other day, some of these movements are undermined is because you have that creeping in, the elements of white supremacy creeping into the movements, because at the point when you start trying to capitalize off of or profit off of the movement, you have let the wolf into the hen house. And so now there is no righteousness in it, because you cannot have a little bit of cancer. You know, it's either you have cancer or you don't have cancer, right? And if you have a little bit of cancer and you don't deal with it, you will eventually have a whole lot of cancer. And so I think that is really, to me, some of the flaws, is that, are you claiming Americanness because you feel like you built it and it belongs to you, or do you want a seat at an unrighteous table?
I think it's both of those things. I don't think it's a question of either or. I think people do have a sense of, my ancestors toiled, right or wrong. We know it was wrong, but toiled to build this empire, right? So that's just the truth of the matter. But I also endeavor to be a capitalist. So I do want to have ownership in this thing. So I think both of those things are how we get here. But to the point of sort of these movements and grifts, I do absolutely think that, again, FBA for me is a grift, because I think Tariq Nasheed runs off with people's money for things. I will give ADOS credit in the sense that a lot of people are like, it's a grift. And I don't know how much money they make off of YouTube, but when they have their conferences and their other things, they really try to make sure that the costs are affordable in terms of understanding. They understand innately that Black people don't have any money. And so when they do things with that in mind. So like, even initially when they had memberships, they did start off with memberships of $1 a month, whereas a lot of people would be like, $1 a month. And they're like, we know that's all y'all got. So for the people who can afford $1 a month. And so anyway, that's just one distinction and one thing that I wanted to pull out there. Is ADOS a grift? A lot of people will say it is, and I do not know if it is or if it isn't. But I've just, from some of the things that I've seen, they're not like, them making money doesn't seem to be the primary thing that they are after. So I don't know. I do have a question related to sort of the politics of it all, right? So first of all, Kehinde, help us to understand what you think Malcolm X would say, or what he did say specifically about who we are, because we never really talked about that. So tell us about who you think the people are. Should we have a designation? And then I have another question to follow up after that.
Well, I just say Malcolm on this one is 100% clear. I don't need to guess what he would say. Just go to a speech. Right. You're not American. You're an African in America. It's a really important part of Malcolm. Say, look, actually, you shouldn't claim, look, you happen to be here whether you're a citizen or non-citizen. But actually, no, Malcolm would tell you, you're not even a citizen. You're a second-class citizen. I'm a colonial subject. You can't actually get the thing you want. The thing you say you want, you've never had. And you can never have it because that's what America is. So you're actually not American. You're African. When Malcolm, I heard one person tell me once that because Malcolm started the Organization of Afro-American Unity, he was all about African Americans. Malcolm defined Afro-American as everybody not in Africa, basically. Latin America, Caribbean, Europe, everybody. Right? So Malcolm's 100% clear. So you can't invoke Malcolm and support ADOS. It's not possible because it completely goes against his politics. And that ties into the second part of this. That logic, ADOS is actually worse than a grift because I think they believe it. I genuinely think they believe it. And if you take, and people like Sandy Darity, who I know Sandy, genuinely believes that you should make this case as a class to get this money, etc., etc. One, don't be ridiculous; it's never going to happen. But it's more dangerous than that, because what does Malcolm tell us? You don't take your case to the criminal; you take the criminal to court. And when you the worst thing you can do, he says, if you put yourself in the jurisdiction of Uncle Sam, you can never be free. So America set up this thing, said that you're supposed to be a citizen, but you're not really a citizen, you're a second-class citizen. They said that these are the steps you should go through to be free. And then you go and follow those steps. You can never, ever be free. You're going to be stuck forever. So Malcolm would absolutely hate, detest, abhor. He's rolling around in his grave right now, go, what's going on? How did we go so badly backwards in the last 60 years? But I stress, he would take it seriously, though, because it's a popular thing, right? So we can laugh at it, but it is actually a really popular thing. But Malcolm would 100% be against it.
So to the point of the popularity, the next thing I want us to think and talk about is this idea of like Black political formations. And so I don't know, I've probably talked with more than one of y'all about this idea. So if we think about like present day Black political formations, and so not social organizations, right? So I'm not talking about Amber's beloved Jack and Jill, right? We'll put that to the side. Right? I'm not talking about them, but I'm thinking about like maybe the NAACP. And that's honestly the only Black political formation I can think about today. But right or wrong, I feel like ADOS might be the most, like it might be the biggest political formation or philosophy that we have. That, I mean, I can't think of any other that are widely known. Like, can y'all think of what are the other Black political formations that exist at the same scale? And then we can fight about whether it's real or fake because it's online too. Mm-hmm. So Salifu?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not really sure that it has the reach or the scale that's being suggested. Like most people around me that I know if I said this to them, they would be like, can you explain what that is? I have a job. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
But I'll say this, even if ADOS was the most popular and widely known sort of Black political movement inside of the United States at the moment, it would only be because they were able to capitalize on the void that's been filled by the destruction of more revolutionary minded organizations, Black revolutionary organizations in the United States, and like the undermining of organizations like you mentioned, like the NAACP, our religious institution kind of thing. So I would say even if they were the most popular, at some point in time, I can see the US government getting behind them because that's how little of a threat that they actually are to the order of things here.
Yeah, I don't think they pose a threat at all. But to the point of sort of real life versus online, I think that there are many people who don't necessarily know ADOS or ADOS, but I think that there are many people who espouse the philosophies, unfortunately. Like lots of Black Americans that I talk to have these same feelings. So I give this example of, I have a brother, and my brother's a janitor, right? And so one of the things that he talks about is he talks about sort of in his mind the threat of immigrants, because he's like, the immigrants are taking the jobs. And he's seen the immigrants take the jobs, like where he works. So for him, this isn't just like a talking point on the news. This is his lived reality of things that he's seen. Now, we try to have the conversations about how it's not the immigrants, right? There is a different enemy that we're all fighting, but it's hard to get people to see that different enemy when I can see the immigrants that are taking the jobs. And so to that point, my question is kind of around, I guess, a couple of things, but one is, you have people who are experiencing real things, and how do we get them to come to different conclusions, right? So how do I help my brother, you know, like I said, in these conversations, how do I help him to see that capitalism might be the problem as opposed to the immigrants that you think are the problem, without belittling people, without making people feel like they don't know enough? Like, how do we start to have those conversations? Because I think those fears are real.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really important that we don't do enough of is helping people to see that they have more than this false dichotomy between capitalism and socialism, right? So part of the messaging that has become really powerful here in the United States is that if you're not a capitalist, you have to be a socialist, right? There's just only two choices of how we have financial systems. And I want to raise my hand and say, I don't have a problem with socialism, but I think that we have to do a better job of showing people and demonstrating for people that commerce can exist outside of capitalism. Like, commerce and capitalism are not the same thing. And I think for a lot of people, their fear is that if you take the capitalism away, what are you left with? And the only thing you're left with is a bread line, like what we all had in our history books from the Soviet Union, you know, when Reagan was standing over there saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, right? And so I do think that we have to do a better job of letting people know that actually we had commerce before we had capitalism. Like, you can still have a system where you buy things and exchange things, or get compensated for your labor, or receive value for the way that you contribute to a marketplace without a capitalist framework. And so I think until we give people the intellectual foundation to imagine that, they're always going to feel that knee-jerk reaction to protect the capitalism from whatever they feel threatened it, whether it's the immigrant, whether, you know, it is, you know, people raising taxes or whatever, because they feel like there's no other choice or no other way that they can survive that does not include forced abject poverty, you know?
Yeah, and also I was going to say that what we have to understand where this comes from. So, like, another Malcolm quote where he says the biggest mistake I made was trying to wake up a sleeping people. And if you actually track back to when Malcolm died, before then, like, internationalism was just a feature of Black movement in America. Here, you know, it was Pan-Africanism wasn't like that. It was all feeding into each other, and you had this robust community education, etc. And essentially, Malcolm predicts all of this. He says, look, if we go down this civil rights road, you're going to have token integration, where some of us will do okay. And what's happened, that's basically what's happened. And all the community stuff we had, Black Panther Party, the organization, the community education, over here, same way, that's all dissipated. And we've all kind of fallen into what Malcolm would call the American nightmare. And that's where you get that nationalism, right? It says that how do you answer any of your questions is with the nation state. And you see this xenophobia everywhere. It's not just America. South Africa is the most xenophobic place I've ever been. And it comes from the same kind of thing, right? Like, we had ANC, we got rid of apartheid. I'm waiting for a house for 30 years. Now I'm seeing this Zimbabwean come in and get a job, and they're like killing people. Like, it's actually worse in South Africa. Like, the xenophobia is so bad, and it comes from that same place because we're looking for the state to answer a question it can't answer. And before, 60 years ago, we knew the state was the problem, and we tried to organize internationally. So you can't fix that overnight. That's a long-term problem. How do you build political education? Malcolm says we need a program of political education because we really have to build up the basics before we can even get to that next step first, right?
That's not really how do we do how do we do it? Is it just political education? But I'm seriously asking the question of, I don't want to keep seeing what I'm seeing. I see a lot of, especially on the left, I see a lot of people just laughing at, dismissing ADOS people, actual people who subscribe to the ideology, not people who just have the lineage, right? And so I'm just sitting here really worried about, are we just supposed to let them be, right?
Okay.
And I feel like I can't leave them. And again, in the same way that I heard the same stuff and I came to some different conclusions, I'm wondering, how do we get people to come to some different conclusions? Even if you believe that it matters that your family is descended from the United States, even if you want to have a special class, like, these things to me aren't necessarily problematic in and of themselves. But what's problematic is when then we say we're not African people, we don't have to be in solidarity with other people in the diaspora. That's, to me, where it becomes really problematic. Salifu, you were going to say something?
Yes, because what you said just now reminded me of something that a mentor of mine has said to me quite frequently. Shout out to Obi Egbuna Jr. Something that he talks about with me is that kind of made me change the way I interact with them online, and I really don't get into things with people anymore. Because ultimately, and I think, okay, his idea was, your job as an organizer, or your job as a person who you consider yourself to be like a conscious person, is to figure out ways to get people who disagree with you to work toward the goals that you believe are valuable or they're worthwhile. So the way that he would say it would be, you got to find ways to make counter-revolutionaries work for the revolution. And I think he was quoting somebody else who said it. I think one of the things that, when it comes to like people who are members of ADOS and they may not subscribe necessarily to all the xenophobic stuff, or maybe they subscribe to some of it, like, oh, I saw somebody come in and take my job. I think something that we have to do at the better job at is like showing people what winning looks like. And so, for example, when it comes to ADOS, something that my mentor has constantly done is he said, okay, so you say your focus, the thing that you believe in, the most noble cause in the world, is focusing on the development and the betterment of African Americans, right? And they say yes. Okay, then he goes, in Cuba, there is a medical school that will accept students and train them to become doctors for free. All I need you to help me do is organize a meeting to get as many Black high school seniors that you can think of at this meeting, this informational session, and let's support them in going to Cuba to become a doctor and have them come back and work in our community. And that is the extent of the argument that he's going to have, because from that point, you're either two groups of people are going to emerge: a group of people who see that as advantageous for their community that are going to work to support that thing, or a group of people who are really just talking and not really interested in making more Black doctors. And that's the argument. I thought we cared about Black Americans. Why are we not trying to get more Black American doctors? But at the same time, those students go to a place like Cuba, they learn what true internationalism looks like. Maybe they come back and they bring those ideas and we can start to break that cycle. That's just like one example of a thing. I think there are other things that we can do that are like that. We just haven't really tapped into a lot of it yet.
Yeah, and that also is like a lot, like organizing is organizing and doing things. And we do same way here. Is you can have the argument as much as you like, but if you organize, so for example, we have Harambe Organization of Black Unity, we're trying to do education, health, etc. If we say, like, we're going to start a Black school, we're going to start it in the community, and we're going to do this, and we're going to try, and we're going to get Black teachers, we're going to bring Black kids in, and we're going to teach about Black internationalism, the community is going to go for that because they need that, right? They understand that's something that we need. And even the Black Panthers, the most left, radical, revolutionary organization, understood the community. If you go in there talks in Marxist Leninism, they ain't gonna listen. So what do? You go and feed kids. You go and do the health clinics. You have to provide for the community. And I think sometimes you just need to stop talking about things, start doing things, and people will come with you on the journey when you start to provide and do things, etc., etc. And they see that it's beneficial for their lives. That's the only real way you can get through that, I think.
I think the sort of the issue that I'm having personally, right, is that I don't know what's the best way to say it. I'm a sellout, right? Like I'm I'm in the suburbs. I'm in community with other people, right? Like I'm trying to resist Amber's constant calls for me to join Jack and Jill. Like this is the life that I'm living. So all I can do is talk. Like like on some level, what I have is the microphone, right? Like I have to, and not that I can't, and not that I'm actually trying to think about ways I can reorient myself and my life and my children such that we can be more in community with more Black people to be able to do these sorts of things. But somebody like me, I just selfishly wonder, like, what can I do besides having these sorts of conversations and, one by one trying to talk about the same way that I had an awakening, how I think other people might be able to have an awakening. But for me, it was just in listening to all of the messages, it was just like, it doesn't seem right that the boat stopping here can make that much difference in terms of who I should be in solidarity with, right? Like that's just sort of the luck of the draw. And I don't know that I want to build my politics on just the luck of the draw. I don't know.
I think one thing we can do is just, I think part of the problem with people like you who live in the suburbs and who, are affluent is I think that we stop telling our story. And I do think that there is an assumption sometimes that there is no solidarity because people see the stuff or they hear a title, this is what I do, or this is where I live. And then they make certain assumptions about you. And I think one of the things that we all need to do a better job of is letting people know what the unsanitized story is. You know what I'm saying? Like there is still very much a real Black struggle that exists if you telling the truth. Like, I mean, if you trying to blend, assimilate, maybe not, I don't know. But if you are out here in this world in any capacity, trying to hold on to and affirm your Blackness, it really does not matter how much money you have, how much power you have. You have a Black experience with a white world that is antagonistic to your existence. And I think that part of what happens is that as we change income levels and classes, we get taught to be dismissive of that experience. Yes, I mean, do I experience racism? Yes, but I work hard. I think we have to do a better job of being in solidarity with our people because there is solidarity to be had, even when, people like you who are wealthy. I know you have a Black story when you go to the doctor. You have a Black story when, maybe you don't have on your Gucci and your Prada in the supermarket or in the mall and you get followed around. Like we all have a Black story. And I think that one of the more insidious messages of capitalism and white supremacy is the way that it teaches us as we move into certain places to be silent about that Black story in a way that distances us from the people who don't have no choice but to talk about it.
That is actually the purpose of Malcolm's House Negro, Field Negro, right? It was actually to remind us we're all in the same boat. Some of us have more privilege than not. And in the suburbs, you can still help. Like, I would strongly argue we need a modern day OAAU. That needs all of us to build that organization, right? And also, I always say political education. So a lot of that, the idea there is a distinct Black American, distinct from the diaspora, is completely ridiculous, historically, contemporary. It's not true. And so actually just telling stories that make that very clear is counter stories, right? Like, you think about someone like Marcus Garvey, who's from Jamaica, which was actually Britain when he was born, most influential person in contemporary African America, probably U.N.I.T.Y, the Universal Legal Improvement Association. So tell the story properly and get those stories out there. It makes it much harder for them to say, look, there's this distinct, unique African American, but isn't connected to everything else.
Erika, sorry, this is just one thing I also want to say about the point that you were making. I also feel like, and I do have to say, disclaimer, I am a socialist, and like I think something that's been really done very poorly by socialists in the United States is like this insistence that like socialism is supposed to be about struggling and never having things and not experiencing like a good life, not being able to secure, you know, a life for yourself or live comfortably. That's actually the exact opposite of socialism. I don't know why people frame it like that. But anyway, I say all that to say that like the concept of class suicide, it is a real thing and like it exists. And I think that there's oftentimes a little bit of self-inflicted like damage that's done on people who kind of like have this idea that like, oh, I'm not in the hood, I'm not in the struggle no more. So like I don't have nothing to contribute. Like Che Guevara was a doctor. Kwame Nkrumah came to the United States and like went to university before he went back to Africa. Amilcar Cabral was a trained agronomist. Like there's a role for everybody in our community to play. I just think we have to get on the same page about what the project is. What is the thing that we are developing? And I think for Black people in the United States, we really got to start having conversations again about self-determination. And I think that that's something that the earlier reparations movements in the United States that like ADOS kind of undercut, we're doing a really good job at, because within our community, there's all kinds of thoughts. Okay. You do have people who want to join the multicultural sort of US society. You do have people who want to go back to Africa. And then you have people who are asking this question. There's millions of Black people here that aren't interested in going anywhere, but also aren't benefiting from being a part of the like larger US sort of imperial project. What is the idea of us developing a nation where we are? I mean, these are all valid questions, but the earlier reparations movements recognize that like Black people have a lot of things to have a conversation about. And I think we need to get back to opening. That's why I appreciate this conversation. Open the space for us to have this conversation in public, because there's some things that we got to figure out. What is that project that we're building? When we figure out that project, doctors, lawyers, we're going to need all kinds of people doing all kinds of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
No, and thank you for bringing up the point of other like previous reparations movements, because that's one of the things that ADOS did that I think is really awful. They basically came to the fore and were like, all of these other reparations movements were trash. Nobody was talking about reparations until we came onto the scene, right? We're the ones who brought reparations into this dialogue that you see. We're the reason that you have political sort of candidates and presidential candidates talking about reparations. If it weren't for ADOS, none of this would happen. And I just feel like that's so antithetical to like everything that Black people stand for in terms of like building on each other's knowledge and legacies and histories. And for them to just be like, all of that was irrelevant and we are the ones, that was especially egregious in my opinion, in terms of what they did politically. But to the point of everybody having a place, for sure. And I mean, not to take it too far, but Kehinde and I have had this conversation about, what's radical, what's not radical, who's radical and who's not radical, right? And certainly I cannot paint myself in any radical light at all, but I have made certain sacrifices because for me, this is more than a philosophy, right? Like, my life would be a little bit different if I had made different choices. But again, Black people's liberation is that important to me. So I think to some degree, I think I try to tell that story, but at the same time, I know that it's not radical, right? It's not radical enough. I'm not doing enough. So my question is just more about how do I do more than just talking to the microphone on the 1st and the 15th? So it's just a selfish desire.
Firstly, that is something like I don't like. It's really important to say, look, political education is hugely important, and that's a starting point for everything. And secondly, I think it's not a question for you specifically. I think it's a question for all of us. Like, what are we doing? That's why I did the whole Malcolm X stuff, because Malcolm gave us a blueprint and said we need an organization that represents our interests across the African diaspora and the continent. That organization does not exist, and the question is, how do we bring that together? And that is going to take all of us to do. And I don't have the answer to it, but certainly that's the question. And those are the kind of questions we should be posing. because without that kind of organization, it's difficult to move forward, right? So anything we can do to push that forward, that has to be the way. But struggle where you are, do what you can. Like, there's what more can you do other than start from where you are?
And I do just have another question in terms of like just the designation, right? ADOS. So again, I don't think anybody on here subscribes to the xenophobia. I don't think anybody subscribes to the Americanness of it all. I don't think any of us are denying our Africanness. But do you think there is? Well, I do want reparations. Yes.
You want the check. You're not going to say no to the check, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Malcolm taught me that. Malcolm said, if the white man is going to give you money, take it. Did he not? Okay. So, but just in terms of like the designation, we have people here who are native and indigenous to this place, and we classify them as such. And so why is that problematic, or is that part of ADOS problematic to you all? Being called a specific thing based on your lineage?
I think the most, I honestly, something that really disturbs me about ADOS really is that like, it's in the name, American descendants. What is that? I have no idea what that is. It like even I'll be honest, and y'all might disagree with me. Even like the terminology like Black American makes me feel a little weird. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like it makes me feel very strange when people say it to me. I'm just coming around to the point where I can call myself an African American because I just need to be normal in public sometimes. But I will take that any day over a designation like an American descendant of slavery or Black American. It just makes me feel like a void. Like, I don't know.
So for you, Salifu, you like, I don't need a designation is silly. And not that anybody would want to take the designation on, but I'm just thinking through, is it bad that they want to have this thing? Yeah. Go ahead, Kehinde.
It's like so here we have Black British. I always tell people, you want to be Black British. Like the designation matters, right? It's more than just a designation, it's identity. Where do you think your politics is? And my politics is with Black people. That's it. That's it. Starts with Black people, not Black people in Britain, not Black people in America, in Jamaica, Black people. And that's a really important political point, right? We have to choose who's our public, who we identify with. And to frame it for America is one of the worst, and to frame not just America, but through slavery. Salifu's right. That's one of the worst things you could do, right? Like that literally means they created you. You were created by so like,
yeah, that's what it is. That's why it bothers me. Yeah, okay, yeah.
You can't do that.
Amber, you look like you might be on the fence.
No, I use the term Black, but to me, Black is a proxy for that which I do not know.
I'll take Black too. I'll take Black too. Just Black. I'll take that.
Okay. And for a long time, my preference was Black American over African American. And I'm grown enough to say that there was probably some latent xenophobia in that. Like, I am not calling myself, because if Africans heard me call myself African, they wouldn't want to claim me. So if they don't want to claim me, I'm not going to claim them. I mean, I definitely went through.
I just don't think African and American go together. I don't want to be African American because I think they don't go together. That's why if I say anything, it's Black American.
You're right.
Yeah, I just call myself Black now, but that was on that journey from African American. I started at Black American, but now I'm just Black. That's just me personally. I'm Black.
So, okay, before we wrap up, let me just be messy here at the end, because why not? That's what I do. So one of the things that ADOS people are quick to point out is like to this notion of Black American or African American versus people who are like, Ghanaian or Nigerian American, right? So the data tell us that typically when you have people who are from Africa and they're here, that they tend to have higher levels of income, higher levels of education. They tend to do better financially, right? And then why are you throwing your head back?
You're right. I go ahead, keep going.
I'm just pointing. And like Amber went to this very prestigious prep school in Dallas, right? And what? She did.
I did. She ain't lying. I did.
And she can tell you now when she looks at the classes that are at that prep school, I don't even know this to be fact, but Amber's going to tell me if I'm lying, that most of the Black people there are not descended from the U.S., that they are Black people that are Africans.
No,
And
that's not true.
Amber?
That is not, it was niggas. It was not African immigrants. Now there were certainly African immigrants, but we were Black
Okay, let me take Amber's prep school off the table. So let me use some real things. If you look at universities, right? Especially if you're looking at Ivy League universities, the enrollment of Black people at Ivy League institutions is mostly from non-Black Americans. The Black people are non-Black Americans. That just is what it is. So they would be like, we paved the way, right? Again, our ancestors toiled, right? We had water hoses that were leveled against our ancestors and all of these other people, right? And you have these tethers who come here and they are taking the spaces at Ivy League universities, and they are better off financially, economically than we are. So why shouldn't we want to make a distinction so that, and especially before affirmative action was sort of overturned in all the ways that it has been, right? Like, there were spots that were for us, and now they're getting them because they have Black skin. And so what do we say to people who have these arguments that have some basis in fact? What do we say?
We got to dream bigger. That fighting over crumbs. That's crumbs. Ivy League enrollment. Those crumbs are so tiny and like flavorless. We got to munch on something else, man.
Yeah, you're talking about so few number of people. You're right. Like, that's not for everybody. And the other thing is, look, we have to have a better understanding of racism. This is where class comes in. So in the UK, similar, like Caribbean, my family's descended from the enslaved. We came over first. We had all these problems. And then you have African migrants come in. They got more money, etc., etc. That's a class issue. The people who are coming from Ghana, from Nigeria, they have money. They have lots of money. Yes. And I promise you, if you looked at the African Americans with that much money, they're in exactly the same places. It's no different, right? The average Ghanaian is not getting to America. Your average Nigerian is doing far worse than the average African American. Far worse, like far. It's not even close. And so part of this is just not understanding that picture that, we can't look at what is the problem. I've always, the nation state, Malcolm warned us this. If you just look at the country you're in, you're always going to mess up. You have to look at it in a much bigger, much bigger picture to understand what is going on. And then that narrative, it kind of goes back to your other question, but I had to put this quote in this. That narrative about toil, is not ADOS directly, but Hannah Nicole Jones. Hannah Nicole Jones, is that her name?
That's her
From
name.
New York Times. New York Times. Nicole Hannah Jones. I always get the names mixed up. Nicole Hannah Jones, 1619 Project. This is the power of the ADOS argument. There's a bit in their introduction to that where she says she used to reject the American flag, but now she'd embrace it because she's seen all this terrible history that African Americans have gone through. And then says, it's because of our bondage, we are the most American of all. And what could be, I've never read anything that
Salifu's gonna faint. You gonna be okay, Salifu? You all right?
Imagine that. Because of slavery, you're the most, you're super American. Nah, come on. That can't be how you're existing in the world. To think that because come on. We gotta do better, right? Dream bigger. That's what he said. Dream bigger.
Yes. So no, thank y'all for having the conversation. And I hope that at the end of this, everybody is clear. If everybody wants to say what they think, that what their positions are, I'll start. So I am Erika. I am African. I am theoretically American, but not in my heart, right? My heart is somewhere else. I am a socialist, down with capitalism. Those are my sort of core beliefs. So just to be very clear at the end of it all.
Yes, I am Amber. I'm Black. I too am a socialist. However, I want my reparations, because while I am in this capitalist shithole, I would prefer to have money over not having money. So I want my reparations.
I'm Salifu, and I am a socialist. I'm a Pan-Africanist. And I do want reparations too, but I want comprehensive reparations. And I know that the kind of reparations that my people deserve, this country is not going to give us. So that's why I'm trying to link up with as many types of Black people as I can, because we have a very, very big and powerful enemy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll just back that up, Kehinde. I'm just going to quote Malcolm, because why not? Malcolm. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it at 6 inches, that's not progress. Even if you pull it all the way out, that's still not progress. You have to heal the wound. But America's never going to do that, ever. The knife's still firmly in your back, and we need to look elsewhere. The argument of reparations tells us what we need is revolution. That's the solution.
And he is Jamaican. Okay, so
why are you trying to get him attacked? You're trying to get him attacked.
I'm going to Jamaica. I'm not sure I'm safe because they weren't happy with me. So,
and on that note, I do want to thank you both for having the conversation with us. You are, of course, always welcome here. If there's anything else you want to talk about. And yeah, do y'all have any things that you're working on, any things that you want to tell people about before we let you go?
I'll jump in with obviously Malcolm X stuff. Nobody can give you freedom. The book don't come out in America till September, but you can watch the film and make it play in YouTube. So just nobody can give you freedom. You'll find a 20-minute documentary about the legacy of Malcolm X.
People should, if you're sympathetic or you're interested, I think people should find ways to support the Thomas Sankara Center for African Liberation and Unity in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is trying to do some really interesting things with the development of the Alliance of Sahel states right now. I think it provides a very interesting model of unification that perhaps Black Americans, African Americans, people in the Americas might to look at and pay attention to sort of like what power could look like when people come together. But that's like a grassroots effort that's taking a swing at trying to do very public facing political education, opening up a library space for kids to come and get information about radical struggles that came before them, that exist in other places, doing film screenings, and trying to build relationships with other people. So check them out.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And Amber, do you have homework for the brokers?
The only homework I'm going to ask you all to do is I'm going to ask you all to subscribe to Kehinde's YouTube channel. Watch the Malcolm X documentary. It is really good. I think we both seen it. I think you watched it too. And then the information Salifu gave us about supporting the center in Burkina Faso, we're going to pop that in the receipts. And so if you have $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $20, whatever, definitely make a donation, because liberation is a group project and none of us are free until we are all free.
Absolutely. And normally this is the part of the show where I'd give some parting thoughts, but today I'm gonna keep it simple. Y'all, we African and we out. We'll catch up with y'all on the next episode of Brokish.